welcome back to our first Coach's Corner of 2025. So here's what we thought we would tackle today. It happens to me quite often with my own people, with people writing in to the Ask Danny part of my training company, and it sounds perfectly logical. So here's the idea. Why wouldn't I just work higher level jobs? Why am I killing myself? What is the point of this? Like, I keep reading about these big fees, and it seems like I would rather have a $80,000 fee than the $20,000 fees I'm going to have to do this month. And it seems like it's the first class of recruiting. You meet a nicer class of people. If you're dealing at high level fees, it seems like it's easier to get retainers at these high level fees. You're dealing with CEOs and presidents of companies. It's great for your self-esteem. Why wouldn't I want to do that? I mean, it seems to me that the guy at Adecco who's making 10 placements a month wants to work at Korn Ferry. I've never heard anybody at Korn Ferry saying, I want to give this up and go to work at Adecco. So what's wrong with that thinking, if anything? Is it a right thing to do? And if so, why? And if not, why not, is the question for the day. So who wants to take a shot at this?
You want to go first, Scott, or I can go?
I've got a couple of ideas.
Yeah.
So I think when you're working at that level, there's more pressure, and that's not bad. Stress and pressure is not bad. That's how we survive.
Right.
I learned this at the Naval Academy. I was an average kid that worked hard, got into the Naval Academy, and there was an external force that pushed me to perform at a level I never would have pushed myself to perform at. Mm-hmm. And I think so it gives confidence. It gives gravitas. You're like, I can do anything now. And I think when you work at that level, there's pressure, not just from a retainer, like, what have you done for me lately? There's pressure. You're dealing with someone who is at C-level, or they're making 500K plus. They're expecting different things, and you have to perform at that level. And if you try to approach them from a subservient posture, they're going to think, you're an interloper. What are you doing here? And so I think that pressure, number one, it forces you to achieve at a level you didn't think you could. Number two, you build chops, you build skills. Number three, you develop this gravitas that starts to attract people to you. So I'll kind of lay that up there.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just curious, how long into your careers before you placed a high level person? I sort of fell into, I'll be honest, I was just trying to place a motor engineer, and I literally called the president just when their vice president of engineering had quit. It was literally just luck. Placed that guy. A few years later, he was looking for a job. By now, he's ready to be a president. So it was just luck, circumstances. So I was a couple years in before I got a 6-figure fee. What about you guys? How early in your career?
For me, I think 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
And a president of North American operations. What inspired me too, Danny, I went to I don't know if you guys remember, Fortune or Forbes had an annual magazine, and it was a tech issue, and it was the venture capitalist, the banker, the engineer, the inventor, and it had like a full page picture of them and then a story about them. And one of them was, the last one was the headhunter. And it was this guy named David Byrne. He and I graduated college together.
I remember this David Byrne guy. Yeah, huge, like $6 million placements.
Yeah. My age, same school, same graduating class, C+ student at best. I think he got fined for punching his fist through drywall in some of the dorms.
As one does.
So what I'm saying is, obviously a very smart guy, but nothing special in school. And I remember reading this, and I was pissed off. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Because I was a tech recruiter, right? And I never actually talked to him. Now he's got his name on 2 buildings of Brian. He went from being the headhunter to a venture capitalist. And he was started in an MRI office. Minimum wage draw, $100-something a week. And this was the key, right? This is what was inspiring for me and could be inspiring. He just had the balls to pick up the phone and talk to people. And we all know how this works. He probably stumbles into one rando because somebody likes him, right? We've all done that. And then he leverages that one into the next one. And then he's got 2, then he's got 3, then he's got 4. Then he's eventually, in a couple of years, the guy. And I think this is what I would coach. This is what I coach my people to do. I have found them, while I agree with Scott, there's more pressure. They're nicer. They want our advice more.
Yeah.
They ask what we think more. And you have to deliver. You can't just be a level recruiter, taking data sheets like you do. You need to understand that to really add value, especially if you're in a niche, by knowing your niche, understanding the marketplace, and understand how those businesses work to a degree. That doesn't take a lot of time. That's reading the Wall Street Journal. That's reading blog posts in your specialty. But I've found it a much, much friendlier environment.
As I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about, I'm trying not to be a hypocrite and at the same time not send people off, on a dream. And I'm really torn with this because the logical person in me, who's trying to respect everybody on this call that's paid their dues and feels like, it took for you 8 years, for me a few years to start working at higher levels. But I think it's a fair question to say, but was that necessary? And I don't want to be a hypocrite. When I think about it, there was the same pecking order in speaking in the early 90s when I started speaking. Everybody knew there was Tony Byrne and Steve Finkel and Peter Lefkowitz. These are the guys. And, you got to put pay your dues. And I was the top producer in Connecticut. And I got asked to speak at a dinner meeting in Connecticut. And there were 3 top producers on the panel. And, I think it's fair to say I did well that night. And the next morning, Terry Petra called me. He had no idea who I was. He got the wrong information. He said, "Hey, I hear you're a speaker and you did well last night." And I said, "Yeah." I guess I was a speaker. I was one of the panelists. And he said, "Do you want to speak at Nationals next month?" I didn't even know what Nationals was. I had no idea. And so, of course, I was smart enough to say yes. And 2 months later, a complete fraud. I find myself on a stage at Nationals at this association I didn't know existed. And it went well. And I was getting 30 calls a week to speak at places. And I was like, well, there is no tenure track in speaking. Not if you're good. As soon as everybody wants the new guy, right? And so, when I coach speakers, as I, did you, Mike, years ago, I was like, no, you can get right to the top really fast in speaking. It's a really weird business in that way. And I wonder, I've never had the guts to do it. I wonder now, especially with the amount of information you can get with AI so fast, I wonder if you hired some 24-year-old kid with some, as you say, balls, and just say, look, you're calling CEOs. And you're asking the same question you would ask to a controller. What keeps you up at night? What are you looking for? No, I've never placed that person, but if you tell me what you're looking for, I'll find you the best one. You got to have some way of handling the fact that when they ask you how long you've been doing this and you say, well, what day is it? Wednesday? That would be 3 days. Yeah. And you won't get some of them, but I want, like you said, you just need one, right? And then once you've done it, like your guy Byrne, pretty soon that's what you do. We just all I don't know what desk you started on, Scott, but for me, I started on an engineering desk and everybody said you had to learn how to place staff engineers. And then when I was placing vice president of engineers 5 years later, I remember being struck by the fact that these are the same qualifying questions. These are the same issues. I don't know why I didn't start with vice presidents of engineers. I don't know why I didn't. I wondered to what degree we calculate how valuable or how necessary the experience level is to do this.
I think for me, it was about 6 or 7 years. I went to a Charles Wadlow seminar. Do you guys remember Charles Wadlow?
Sure. I went to his,
Very impressive.
Amazing.
Very impressive training.
He gave a format and a formula for how to pursue retainer searches, sell senior level searches. It's the first time I ever considered that. I started with the firm in North Carolina where I quit because they didn't pay me commissions, and I didn't even know it was an industry. I didn't even know it was a thing. And I would have stayed there if I'd gotten paid. And I think they just kind of kept people looking at this level instead of wanting to rise up.
Right.
I think there's more opportunities when you go. I think having coached so many top performers, I had to go through what I've had to go through over the last 30 years to get to where I'm at today. I don't think have been able to do this had I not had this large volume of experiences and really understanding and studying recruiting and people. And I think that you can have somebody, because since 2017, I've had a model where I have somebody that's my telephone shoulder tapper. They put people on my calendar. They don't talk too much because, they just put them on my calendar. And that's enough. That works for sophisticated people. I think they do expect someone to have a deep level of narrow expertise in their field to be able to carry on an intelligent conversation. I also think, how would you feel about hiring a 22-year-old life coach? You probably would,
Right.
you know. I
Right.
think you want
Right.
somebody that has a little bit of gray on the temples,
Yeah.
which fortunately we all have. But I don't think it has to be there. I think it has to be a sophisticated perspective. I think something that's creative. Smart people like interesting people. They want to be around interesting people. And then also they're learning the language of how to communicate where you're not too pushy. You say things like, if this is a priority for you, I would be happy to meet with you. You can't push it. You can't stalk it and say, hey, Jared, it's me again. This is my 5, 6, 7th voicemail for you. I'd appreciate the professional courtesy of return a phone call. That doesn't fly with people like that. They're going to shut you down forever. Once they shut you down, you're completely out forever. But once you're in, then you're in forever. I think that they're more adept at sniffing out phonies. People at a higher level, they're soul readers. And if you have any ounce of inauthenticity, if you try to be something that you're not, if you never went to college and you're in rock and roll band and you got into recruiting, that's a good story. Be that guy, right?
Right.
So I think those are the things that people at that level, because that's where my world is, meeting with law firm chairmen, doing big deals, people that make $1 million a year. You know, that's my world. And they want people that I'm going to call you at 7:30. I'm going to call you at 7:30. I'm going to get you a document tonight. And if I can't get it tonight, I'm going to send you a note and say, I'm so sorry, I can't get it to you. I'll get it to you tomorrow afternoon. And you set those expectations and you learn how to manage that. If I'm going to get you something by Monday, I say I'm going to get it to you by Tuesday, but I'm going to get it to you by Monday. Things like that. I think that's what people like that expect. You know,
Yeah.
just
And
dealing at a high
as
level.
you're talking, Scott, I'm thinking about, I honestly, I just have always been better on the client side. Like I feel like I much prefer, if we need a job order, give me a list, I'll get us a job order. The deeper I got into my job, the harder it got for me to enjoy recruiting because it was just so much gray area. You know, it was half therapy, half counseling, half getting jerked around by somebody who just felt like talking to a recruiter was better than working. But as you're talking, I'm realizing that the hard part, I think, if I were to say, I'm going to hire somebody brand new and turn them into high-level search right from the start. You're running a CEO desk, which I'm so tempted to do now that we're talking about it. Where would his problem be? You're right. His problem would be a lot of the CEOs would say, you don't know what you're doing. You haven't done this long enough. But I really do believe in the power of energy and enthusiasm. And I did get a few higher level, not C-level, but I got a fair share of VP searches in my mid-20s by saying, look, what I lack in polish, I'll make up for in passion. And I refuse to lose. And they just liked the energy
authentic.
of a
That's
new
you.
person.
That's
and I think that, but I struggled, and I think anybody would struggle on the candidate side. Like I didn't know enough to know who was a really good candidate because I didn't really know what it was like to manage, you know, a P&L of an engineering team of $17 million. And I, you know, buying capital equipment was something I saw on a job description, but I didn't know what was involved with. That means you're putting your name on $17 million worth of equipment. And if that equipment is a bad purchase and we now lose money, that's your ass. My problem was on the recruiting side. I could get lied to and fooled by candidates very easily who knew how to talk a good game. And at the lower levels, I was used to, you want a candidate who seems qualified, who's been doing it for a few years and then presents well. Well, at the higher levels, everybody presents well, but that doesn't mean they know what they're doing. And there's a lot more, I think, manipulation, and it's much harder to understand the candidate side. So maybe the experience level that would prevent you from being successful is really after you get the search.
So, as I know, Danny, you and I have gone through therapy. So it's
not since yesterday. Come on, give me a break.
But this is the stuff, like when I listen to you as a coach, when I listen to you, I'm like, all of that's true. And most of it's in your head amplified. When David Byrne was on the cover of that article, he was 32 and he went to the same business school I did. It was nothing special. It was nothing special. Right. And he started maybe in recruiting a year or two before I did. I honestly think, like one of the questions that I asked, and I was asked this by somebody who was that I interviewed to be a recruiter. I thought it was how I asked all my job orders. If I want you to imagine, Danny, we met a year from now, and you've hired this person, and it's been a year, and they've done an amazing job. They've checked all the boxes. They've met and exceeded your expectations. And you're having your annual review. The board is having the annual review with this president of this division. What did he or she accomplish? Right now, I get a story, and then I can go deep on. They're going to give me 12 areas, right? I can go, how so? Say more. Why is it important? And then, to a degree, as a recruiter, we have to understand it, but we are parrots. So now I call Scott as a candidate, and behavioral based interview. Give me examples of when you managed a budget of $17 million or more capital equipment, and how did that turn out? What was your process? So yeah, in these interviews, we have to be more thorough, but we have to be more thorough on the questioning side.
Right.
And, I don't know, like you did engineering, I did tech. I placed people that did the TCP/IP protocol. I still don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Do you know what that stands for, Mike?
I don't even know what it stands for.
And here's something I've done, because earlier this year, I'm like, I got too spread out. I shut everything down that wasn't doing placements, and I got niched in corporate and finance. And I got retained by, I hadn't done long-term retainers since 2013. I decided to do that again, and that helped out a lot because I got focused and I've got some pressure on me. I've got to produce. And this is a firm, they represent big banks, and firms resemble their clients. So they're very conservative, and they renewed our 6-month contract recently because of what we've done for them. But they knew I'm not a specialist in finance. I'm a specialist in getting people to you that do the work that you want. And I'll even, self-deprecating humor. People love that. If you do it in the right way, I'll tell candidates many times, I'll just say, I'm just matching the big words here. You understand. Right. I'm a civilian. Right. I'm not in your world. And every once in a while, you find somebody who's a bird dog, they're the person that would love to give you referrals. They'll give you leads. If you don't know something about your niche, call that person, because they'll help you out. Gary, it's me again. Hey, can you help me out with this? What does this mean? How does that work? Even candidates that you've placed, call them. They owe you. Help me with this. How does this fit together? What is important to you? Every time I meet with someone, I listen and I pay attention and I remember it. And I think that when you admit to people, I'm a specialist and I'm really, really good at getting smart, highly qualified people to you that have a fear of change, and I get them to feel safe about talking with you. So I might not be the technical expert, but those are the things that you're going to have to talk amongst yourselves to make sure it aligns with what you want. That's how I've handled that with success.
Well, I think what we're saying is the skills translate, right? Like if you tried this and maybe you didn't become, a guy that specialized only in C-level searches, I think you would say, let's say 30% of your business was higher level jobs and 70% was your normal contingency work. Mm-hmm. You'd find yourself much better at the contingency stuff having played at that level, right? I'm not so sure the opposite is true. Some of the stuff you do to close a high volume contingency desk wouldn't translate very well. Yeah. Like Scott said, you can't go to somebody and say, hey, stop ghosting me. I don't appreciate it. Call me back. Well, they don't care what you appreciate, and that's fine.
That's right.
But there's so many other things that I think make working. Let's put aside the 24-year-old and say, okay, you're 5-10 years in and you're saying, how do I go from 400,000 working really hard to 650? And it seems to me I get asked that question a lot in personal coaching, and nobody wants to hear we'll work harder because they all have lives and they all have kids, and they're like, I feel like I work hard enough. Okay, well then we have to either have better ratios so that you close more deals for the amount of activity you're willing to get. You have to get higher fees. Well, it's hard for me to get higher fees. These people all want me to do it 20%. Okay, well then 20% of a $200,000 job is more than 20% of a $100,000 job. So working higher level jobs is a potential way for the person who's been a long-time $400,000 biller to start playing at the 650 level. So let's talk about that person. If that person said, I'm not a rookie, I know the business, how do I start to work high-level searches? I don't know what your advice would be as far as how to. I've always found first to follow the money, right? So if let's make a distinction between venture capital and private equity, right? I mean, venture capital is saying, hey, we found this new technology, this new company, and we got to staff it up. And the founder is a good dude, but he's never run a business. And now we got to get him aside and get some serious people in there. If you can get to those companies, those VCs who are going to buy that company or invest in that company before it gets too far along and everybody's heard about them, then yeah, you might get some higher level searches there. And the VCs don't care about fees because they're trying to staff this thing up. The private equity side's a little different because these guys have already identified a company as worth buying, but they're just looking for a 3 or 4 times X and they want to sell it to somebody, but they've identified that this guy or that woman are not strong enough, so let's remove them. So there's the occasional search there. So I would follow the money. I've also found that what we think couldn't possibly work at that level absolutely does, because they never get an MPC call. Whereas that typical controller gets 10 a week. This C-level person, if it's done in a sophisticated way, I've targeted your company, I followed you for a long time, there's a person who came on the market that I think would be uniquely impactful for you. We found the MPCs is how we get the majority of our higher level searches. And when I say higher level searches, I mean, not to brag, but a guy in my office, Joe, just closed the biggest deal in our history, $825,000 salary.
That's great.
And a $250,000 fee. So, but we got that from calling companies and saying, hey, I got this guy. So I'm not sure we even have to reinvent the wheel as far as that goes.
No, that process works. Because I think I said it on an earlier podcast, all these guys and gals want to hear about talent. Yeah. And so what I coached my team members, the way I did it on my desk, it's not like a day where you wake up one morning, you look out and you go, today I am a now only C-level, V-level recruiter. It's, I call it like whale hunting. You want to have that a part of your day.
Yeah.
15 minutes, 20 minutes, bread and butter with whatever you're comfortable with. This way it's because there are fewer of those openings at the higher up.
Fewer openings, no question.
Mm-hmm. So what I coach people to do, and what I did was market a strong vice president to a C level. Mm-hmm. That's one, you'll find out if there's not a president.
Yep.
You'll find out a lot about that by marketing to that person. And again, with that candidate, you want to know him or her inside out. That is one way. And I usually tell people, just do it 15, 20 minutes a day. Have a campaign. You could start with an email or an in-mail, follow up with a phone call. That should be a step process, not the stalky way, as Scott talked about. But you also want to show you're persistent.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's customized. And like, I don't send anything out in a mass email. Hey, Danny, in a recent engaged search, I uncovered this, boom, boom, boom. If I don't hear from you in 2 days, I'll forward that email and I'll go, hey, Danny, did you see below Mike? Right. And then I'll have a phone call. Now the phone call, I'm not going to say, I'm sending you an email. I'm going to now do a verbal pitch. And a lot of times you have to be, as you guys know, the executive assistant to that person is one of the most powerful people in the company, other than the CEO, if not the most powerful.
Yeah.
And I could get in a lot with that person. I remember talking to one, I go, I've left this guy like 6 or 7 messages. I knew he had an opening for a vice president. She goes, call him between 7:30 and 8. Yeah. I'm not here yet. He's reading the Wall Street Journal. He's kind of relaxed. There's nothing going on. He didn't hear from me. That's the best time to talk to him. And how many times have we gotten a tip like that? Here's the best way or the best angle to get a hold of one.
Yeah, and early is usually better for these guys, whether you go through the EA or not. But yeah, they're there early. That's how they got into that C-suite, by getting there early and caring, for sure. I also found that this is a referral centric business. You've got to say to your buddy Scott, who you just made a placement with, how do I get a conversation with your president? Or you look on LinkedIn and you see who you've got first and second level connections with. And I found the top recruiters who work at high levels are constantly asking not for business, but for intros. And then they try to, as you say, Mike, they try to position themselves as, would I love your business? Great. But this call is just to let you know who I am, what I do, and to let you know these guys are very good at basically saying, without coming across too egocentric, they'll just say, look, I know everybody. I know everybody. There's no way in the world that can't be helpful to you at some point. Like, I've been doing this. So this is where you can sell your gravitas. I've been doing this for so long. I know everybody. There's no way that's not helpful to you, is literally the line that I've heard used. And so you're not even asking for business. At some point, 6, 8 contacts in, they're going to have some business, and there's going to be this sort of, maybe it's not even conscious, but this law of reciprocity kicks in at some point. And they go, Scott's giving me so much good information. I'm looking for a high level attorney. Let me go to Scott. It's going to come back to you at some point, because this is the part that makes everybody crazy when they ask $1 million producer who's got a $150,000 average fee, where'd you get that search from? Well, they called it into me. Seriously? Boy, does that sound like a nice life. But they don't tell you about the 27 free calls they made to get that going, right?
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right, Danny. I think, so later this month, I'm speaking at a big national recruiting companies conference, and I'm talking about best practices of direct hire. And I'm kind of basing it on the Pareto principle, 80-20. 80% of your value comes from 20% of the process. First contact, first round interview, right? And how you submit the candidate, that's the greatest value. I think when I looked at recruiting, if I spend 100% of my time, I get 100% return. If I spend 80% of my time of it, I only get a 40% return. I think that's true. But recently I've been challenging, if I put 100% of my time and effort on recruiting, how can I get 150% back without having to grow a search firm and hire recruiters and manage them? And it's through leverage. The key to success in any business is leverage. And it doesn't mean hire recruiters. It means, how can you work on higher level fees? How can you do group deals? How can you get in with the private equity company that get introduced to their portfolio clients? So I'd say the key is look for leverageable opportunities. Secondly, I was doing a coaching session about 9 months ago for a company that I'd done some work with years ago. They were doing accounting and finance. I'm like, it's just so frustrating. They used to call us back. Now they don't. And I'm like, that's because everybody got into recruiting in 2021. And it's so saturated now. It's so hard. I think people here, my friend Ben Mehta, he produces the Elite Recruiter podcast, which is amazing.
He does a great job.
Yeah. He does. And I think the downside of some of those stories, I was broke. I was living inside of a retired Greyhound bus at the Port Authority in New York. And I joined a recruiting firm in my first year. I billed $700,000. I think people miss the work that goes in. They hear, they read the headline. They don't listen to the rest of the story. And so I think they assume it's going to be that easy. I also think that there's 3 diamonds under 100 rocks. You might find them on the first 3. You might find them on number 97, 98, number 99. Sounds like a search I'm working on right now. Usually you'll find them on number 17, 47, and 97, but you have to go through all of them. You have to do the work. And I'll kind of tie it in with this. You need to be authentic. What is it that's distinct about you that can be pushed out into a brand? I coached a recruiter. He used to be an actor. That's good. We're going to use that as why you're different than everybody else. Right. Everybody's unique. It doesn't matter who your dad was. It doesn't matter what school you went to. Your story is special to people. Be yourself and find that edge. Find that unique distinction, not just what's different about you, what's distinct. What can you say about yourself that nobody else can say? Here's an example. I'm an artist. I do watercolor. I do oil. I'm going to create my own genre. It's the 3 perfections. The Japanese created it: art, poetry, and calligraphy. That's going to be my whole art. Every painting has a poem in my own calligraphy. So if you can't be like everybody else, create your own story. Anyways, I'm getting a little bit excited here.
And what I find too is the residuals. When you do get through to the point where you fill some higher level jobs, these C-level people, they don't want to go find another recruiter. It's like, okay, that's the guy I use for that stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not. They don't really want to audition it, and we know because we've lost so many of those. How many of those pitches where someone would say to me, "You guys are great. You did a great job. And you seem really slick, and I know you can do it." But Bob over here has filled 5 of my jobs, including placing me, and I work with Bob. There's a high level of loyalty at the high level. But I also want to caution people who hearing this that get inspired by these stories. As Mike says, there's fewer of the jobs. The process is slower, guys. This $825,000 placement that we just put up started in August.
Yeah.
So, those of you who are used to a pipeline and backup candidates, and I don't care if Scott turns it down because I got Mike getting an offer tomorrow. Well, no, this is going to be, I hope to get this offer this quarter. And if I get it, then I'm a big shot. And if I lose it, then hide the sharp objects, right? When Joe put this placement up, first, of course, we congratulated him, but I said, just so you know, if this guy falls out and then you go to his house and mow everybody down with an AK-47, if there's one recruiter on the jury, you walk, right? Because that's how devastating fallouts are when you work at this high level. So, there's pluses and minuses. There's less jobs. There's slower processes. The good news is fees tend to be easier to collect because when it's $150,000, $250,000 fee, people talk about when and how are we going to pay that, right? Yeah. There's no calling accounts payable and they go, oh, we didn't even know about this fee. Oh no, this has been discussed.
And they're happy to.
Our collection rate at higher levels. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys about before we leave is, and maybe this is me just trying to find a solution. We get beat by the hydrogen struggles and Corn Ferries. And like I said, they branded so well and they're good at what they do. We can't recreate their model because what they do is they take, Mike here is a CFO for this company and well-known, and everybody has heard about the guy when he wants to retire at 57 because he's got so much stock that he goes into Corn Ferry and he runs a practice, which is a nice way of saying, you're a figurehead, go get the jobs and we'll take it from there. And they got a recruiting team around him. So he's, quote, a headhunter when he's really just working his contacts. That's really hard for someone starting at Hobson Associates to get to that guy's level. But what I say to my people is Corn Ferry doesn't want anything below $250,000 fee. So the average search firm that all three of us service is got a $32,000, $35,000, $38,000 fee unless they're working contract to hire admin stuff where it might be lower. So everybody's in that mid-management level where there's this whole upper middle class of $70,000 to $110,000 fees. Not the C-suite, but the CMOs, the CFOs, the VPs of engineering, the VPs of talent act. These are people making $300,000. So Corn Ferry doesn't want that. Yeah. People at lower levels don't know how to get that business. So we try to get to that. What I call the middle virgin area, right? Where nobody's playing in that space and it's not as convoluted. You still feel like you work in higher levels. Doesn't take quite as long to fill these jobs. Little easier to find the people because they're not all unicorns. I think if you really want to break through, you might want to look at that upper middle class first.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. That's a good place.
Yeah, and I think that's where, but marketing like vice presidents to presidents or CEOs is where how you break into that. Number one. Number two, what'll happen to your point when you talk, this is a couple areas, Scott talked about differentiation, where I differentiate and I advise others to was, well, we're looking at Hydrix or we're looking at, any one of the big ones. And I'm like, okay, here's what you want to do. Ask them, do you know who's going to execute the search? Well, the partner. No, he comes in, she comes in, they take the search, then they give it to a 20-something to do the research and the sourcing. Now, it's important to do the research. We have a team that does that. But you got 30 seconds, Danny, to make an impression. And you want a 28-year-old to be the first outreach to a relatively happy candidate? Mm-hmm. With me, you get me on that first conversation. Yep. You get me and my experience. Call that partner and say, are you doing the original outreach yourself on the phone? Mm-hmm. And the reason I liked, I had people sourcing on my openings, all my regular level openings. I loved doing the higher level search. One, it was an education in my niche.
Yeah.
You find everything going on. And what better way to build credibility? They'd be at the offer stage. I would still be talking to people because I legitimately still had an opening. It wasn't accepted yet. And I just wanted to use that as a desk builder.
Yes.
Because if I talk to 150 people in the course of that search, they're going to, and I have some kind of an impact, meaning, obviously the timing's not good, Danny, but what would you want to hear about down the road if you ever considered a career change? And why is that important to you? And I can engage all of these people for 10 or 15 minutes. People go, well, they're not qualified. They're not interested. That is such stinking short-term thinking, right? It's all these conversations are job orders. They're all, the timing's not good right now. Hey, you know what? Unlike a lot of the retained firms that work at this level, we're not insulted by the $30,000, $35,000 fee to build your sales team, to build your engineering team. What would I have to do, Danny, to earn the right to build your team? They're so well situated.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And these calls are, unlike our other candidates, I don't know, I don't have the exact percentages, but there was like, when we were recruiting on a high level position, it had over a 50% return call rate.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because nobody recruits these guys.
No doubt. And later on, these people become higher authorities and presidents themselves. One guy in Pinnacle said to me, I never could figure out how to get into president searches until all the people I placed 10 years ago as VPs became presidents.
One thing I learned from Charles Wadlow, who was smart enough to get out of training and get back into recruiting before I did, right? He said, make a list of all those people you've taken search assignments from and call them and try to recruit them. And so I did that. And I couldn't say, now I'm doing VP level and above. I would say there's a very good chance that in the next 6 months, I may have opportunities that align with where you are professionally in your career. If and when that happens, would you be open to hearing about this? No. Let me close my door. I got a COO, wanted to get the heck out. I marketed that guy. First time. Who do you call when you're marketing a COO? You don't call the VP of HR. You call the CEO. And I would get calls back. One of them said, I don't have a need for anybody like that. I said, why'd you call me back? He said, it sounds like you know the kind of people I want to get to know. And that's where it starts. You can start with something like that, which I thought, and I give him so much credit just for opening my eyes and seeing that there's a path forward to really doing that. There's a formula.
I think all three of us have known the power, and that's what it is, right? It is a good feeling to work at higher levels. You do feel like a big shot, and there is some value to that. And there's no point going into whatever psychological trauma we all had that made us need that this point in our lives. But I will caution the people that are listening to this to think about, there are people who are just not meant to do it because you're high volume recruiters. And, like I think of Robin in my office or Jen, everybody goes, where do they get the energy? They crank out multiple placements every month. And I think they would both be bored and terrified at the pacing and the lack of activity at high levels. Vice versa, there are people meant to work at high levels who see what they do and go, oh my God, I could never generate that kind of energy to run a high volume desk like people like Gwen Hicks does in Pinnacle. So you have to know your personality and the volume at which you need to work.
I think you can offset that by finding other metrics. My longest deal was like 18 months. Yeah. And it was like, here it is. They let me know, what's your address? Going to FedEx you the check.
Right.
Thanks. And paid me on time. But anyways, I think that you're right. You can offset that by having other metrics just by, and I do a whole bunch of stuff just to keep my funnel full. And such a great topic, Danny.
Yeah, I think it's the smartest thing to do would be, as we said earlier, like take a percentage of your day, show some discipline, let it take some time. I think it is too risky if you've never done it before to say, I'm shutting down my desk and being a C-level person. I wouldn't want them, sending us nasty emails 6 months from now saying, I never got a search. I ruined my desk. Thanks for the podcast, guys. But if you are able to do it, you won't go back. You won't go back. And you'll know when it's time to jump off and say, okay, now I'm all in. This is what I do, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. We will do
Always
this again
fun.
soon. Always fun. Talk to you
Thanks for
soon.
the opportunity.
Thank you.
Happy hunting.
You too.